Today, Rinpoche did a summary of the section on how the afflictions arise, and then got into the new section of karma that is intended action and karma that is intention.
Chibiri kato da samba jangwa samba de chibi setala lutu sawa taba trebi lanji ranji tenla papa jeje ta dana samba jangwa de la taba tunji ngazo wa da te chibi ta de la donga de kunyu gona samba da la junye gona samba ni che donga de kunyu gona samba la doden kuyu nyeme da kunyu jori ta doden kuyu nyeme de la Doden Deji Thomas on peut pas dans Donga Gombangoni, Donga Gombango de la Donga Ji son autre sur route Sache, Tanya Bakunju Kunjure sans pas marbe, ou de la Nyomoba Ji tu te laisses ou dessus, then Chibo Joalem sur son marbe. What about Chechi Jana?
Once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section with the major heading, Training the Mind in the Stage of the Path Shared in Common with Beings of Medium Capacity. So when we look at that outline, there are four major categories that deal with that topic. The first category is the mental training. The second category is the measure of the determination to be free, or the actual measure of renunciation. The third category is dispelling misconceptions, and then the fourth category is ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So those are the four categories. When we begin with the first category, which is the mental training, we find that there are two categories. First, the identification of the mind intent on liberation, or the identification of renunciation. And then the second category is the method for developing the mind intent on liberation. So once that identification of that mind intent on liberation takes place, we move to the actual method for developing that mind, and that section has two major headings. First, reflection on suffering and its origin, and then a second category of reflection from the viewpoint of the 12 links of dependent origination. So looking at the first category, reflection on suffering and its origin, we find two. Reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and then reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin. So the first category, reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, there are actually two categories in the Lamrim Chenmo. First category is showing the significance of the Buddhas asserting the truth of suffering is the first among the Four Noble Truths, and the second category is the actual meditation on suffering. So in that actual meditation on suffering, we find the general and specific sufferings, and then we have the enumeration of the 3 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 8 types of suffering. So once we get through with that section, the actual meditation on suffering, we then move on to the category which is reflection of the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin. So when we move forward to that section, we then have the 3 categories there. First, we have the category of how the afflictions arise. The second category is then how you thereby accumulate karma. And then the third category is how you die and are reborn. So those are the 3 major headings when we get to reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin. So, Diksun. The Ewa Sung. So then the first category under that reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin is how the afflictions arise. And how the afflictions arise is described by 4 different parts. First is identification of the afflictions, or identifying the afflictions. And then the next category is the order in which the afflictions arise, or the stages of the arisal of the afflictions, literally. And then the next category is the causes of the afflictions, and then the final category, the faults, or the downfalls of the afflictions. So those are the four categories under that heading of how the afflictions arise. Diksun.
어제 다 담불라니 영무시 생년도 수수 생이지. 안에 다 수수 생년들 쭉 말해 준들 쭉 혼도샤 콘로 나제 특송 담민가. 안에 지다 타달로다 더 주진 주진도 주진 다가 주팀 로다 주이면 말해. 어디 생이 주지. 어든마다 영무 비줄라 쭉 말해. 대미바 Doesn't Sheba Gomba Hila Sheba, what about the Marva?
So, under the first category, identifying the afflictions, we have basically definitions. And the definitions are first the general definition of affliction, and then we have specific definitions of those of 10 different afflictions. And those 10 different afflictions can be divided into two categories. Those afflictions that are view, and then those viewless afflictions. So the afflictions that are viewless are attachment, hostility or anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. And then those afflictions that are view, we have the reifying view of the perishing aggregates, an extremist view, a belief in the supremacy of wrong views, a belief in the supremacy of ethics and religious discipline, and then actual wrong view. So those five are the afflictions that are view. And then in that section, all of those are defined. So there's a definition of all of those different 10 different afflictions. And then we get to the next, the Rinpa, Rinpoche. The Ngatsu Ju la Dru, Ngatsu the Jita Chi Rinpa, Nipa the Lamas.
Nipa the Lamas. What Jita Chi Rinpa the Mar, Jita Chi Rinpa the Marba.
The Dru leg, the Jagamare.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, then the Tambo the Rimbo, the Jagamare.
Jita Chi Rinpa the Ba. Jita Chi Rinpa the Ba. Jita Tangaza, Danzi, Susan Deba Tebaina. And then Pombo de Dad Ruban the Geshe Lharampa, and the Shad Hondo to Jeveres, Nomoche Wares. Jita Mariban Jid Debatan Jita Kuru Maribares, Jita Geshe Lharampa, and then the Shad Hondo Jumuka Wares, Chirimato de Marva.
Kaka Samadana, then
Kaka Santana, Pombo Dad Ruban Zimba. Pombo Dad Ruban Zimba, the Geshe Lharampa. And then the Shadow Kuruta, Namuka Chemures. Jita the Mariban Jit, Devatan Jita Kuru Maribares, Sibares, Jita Geshe Lharampa, and the Shakunros, Namuka, what they teach about in Dua.
So the next category is the order in which the afflictions arise. So under this category, we find two ways of looking at it. One way is if we consider that ignorance is different than the reifying view of the perishing aggregates. So if we look at it like that, then the ignorance that grasps at the person as being truly established, or grasps at the aggregates as being truly established, this ignorance then creates this grasping, which then creates attachment and anger and so forth. If we look at it as one and the same, then we say that the reifying view of the perishing aggregates is the ignorance itself. And then that's what creates the attachment and anger and so forth. So first we have this grasping, this reifying view of the perishing aggregates, and then as a result of that, we then have a reaction of the arisal of afflictions. So there's a reaction, and that is the arisal of the afflictions. So this is the second category, and what's presented there. It shows how this reifying view of the perishing aggregates, or the ignorance that grasps at the aggregates as being truly established, sets off this reaction, which is the arisal of afflictions. So this is number 2. And then category number 3 is the causes of the afflictions, and there are 6 causes of the afflictions. First is basis, second is object, third is social context, fourth is habituation, fourth is explanation, fifth is habituation, and sixth is attention. So these are the 6 causes of the afflictions. Diksan Rinpoche.
Whatever. Tan Nyamu Ngozwa Terwatin Jajibi Saji Sung Dine, and the Kwandu Bijudla later Nyamu Bajina, Zu Nyum Turis. Le John de Bayana, Numena, what the quality Joala to Maris, not really. CBC Nagi, Legend Penny Mind, the Legislature was Ross. That what the and then Yamut the quantity Jews who answer Yamu, Repumbala, the Nyabatan Gure, Yamula Kibagures, such a nearby Jane Jajibe. That then what the Yamu was what the Sajil Techibare.
Somba.
Yamu was what Jetaji and Ba.
Let's So if we go to Jayan Sheba's commentary and we look at his outline of this section, how the afflictions arise, we find that he has it into 3 different categories. The first category shows how that the afflictions are primary when we look at the causes for creation of cyclic existence, or the afflictions are really the root. And it shows that they are the cooperating condition that's necessary for the arisal of cyclic existence to take place. And then in that section, we find the quote from the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition by Dharmakirti that says, "The karma of one who has transcended craving for existence lacks the potency to project another birth because its cooperating conditions are gone, because the aggregates will rise again if you have craving." So here, it's showing the necessity of the afflictions in order for the arisal of cyclic existence to take place. So that's the first category, that the afflictions are the chief, the afflictions are the root of the creation of cyclic existence. The second category is the importance and the need to rely upon a remedy in order to abandon these afflictions. And then the third category is the same as we find in the Lamrim Chenmo, the 4 categories that are identifying the afflictions, the order in which they arise, the causes of the afflictions, and the faults of the afflictions. So Jayan Sheba breaks that down into 3 categories. Diksum. Chongo Din.
Larin Din.
Okay. Lesser.
What Jeremy Larin Larin Chimut number.
Lesser.
Never Yamovachi to Lesu to Chipo Joala to Los, Tombu Koandubi, Jula, Yamu Gujan, Yamobatu Ite, Temena, Hasaji Le, Tonle Deva Yujan, Land of Chula Super maybe, Sabin Yugumunduba Jindo, Tala Henji Jen maybe, Dongaji Yugumundubi said Yamobi, Yamoba Yuna. Ne le nga me jang tamata sa ne phombo shema phemba shebish ros phemba shebish nande le CBC le nagi le jen phenu mai hanji sheba se ros what is un dabudwa.
So when we look at Lama Tsongkhapa's smaller Lamrim, or stage of the path text, we find in the medium stage of the path to enlightenment the explanation as follows of how the afflictions arise. That karma and afflictions are both necessary for the arisal or the creation of cyclic existence, but the chief or the root of the creation of cyclic existence, or the primary cause, is the afflictions. And then it gives the example of a seed without moisture, soil, etc. will not produce a sprout. So in the absence of afflictions, even though you have accumulated karma in the past, there will be no sprout of suffering because there's no cooperating condition there present. So the afflictions serve as a cooperating condition for the arisal of the cyclic existence. And it says, if afflictions are present, you immediately accumulate karma, and then have a future rebirth, have future aggregates. And then it quotes, as does this text, Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition. It says the karma of one who has transcended craving for existence lacks the potency to project another birth because its cooperating conditions are gone.
What the Pompa was about the Jagger, what the Jita Maribare, telling your Mojo, telling your Mojana, Josa. Jita the Mariban, Jit Dobatana, Jitun Dobatana, Jita Ni, your Mojo, Tao. They on Jide Datuzua, Rajan Susu, Zizu Juba Shela, Tejena, Rangshula Chaba, the Jen Shula Down, Shadan Joyu, Dalai Mene. Kimbachela Danila Taji to Tajin Tachu to Marbe, Tadonti, Shabanala, Chudu Tuju Chuzi, Tajin to Dame Tumbatan, Tetembi, Ledretan, Tejitan, Conchula Subatada, Mento Nabi, Lota. Yana Tatabu Yota Manchabi in a main to Tazun Jete, Nanele, David and the Gentuche, Dajen Chatan Zintan, Dada Tande Yondele, Yabatan Juanjo, Dabu. Jetachi in Bakadure.
Drabudu, cheaper.
Do that.
So when we look then at the identifying the afflictions section in the medium stages on the path to enlightenment, we find exactly the same information. We find the general definition of affliction, and then we find 10 specific definitions of the 10 different afflictions. And then we get to the next category, which is the order in which the afflictions arise, and we find the same points. One way to look at this is to consider ignorance as distinct from the view of the perishing aggregates. For example, when twilight falls on a coiled rope, its status as a rope will be unclear, and someone may imagine that it's a snake. Similarly, according to this view, the misapprehension of the aggregates as a self arises due to the darkness of ignorance, which prevents clarity about how the aggregates exist. Then the other afflictions then develop from this misapprehension. But if you're looking at it as the two are identical, ignorance and the view of the perishing aggregates, then the view of the perishing aggregates is the root of the affliction. So if we say it's the ignorance that sees the aggregates and establishes a self, that is how it takes place, and then afflictions arise, or it is that the ignorance itself is that view of the perishing aggregates, and then that is what causes the arisal. So it says the same thing. And then when the view of the perishing aggregates apprehends a self, discrimination arises between self and other. Once you've made the distinction, you become attached to what is associated with yourself and angry or hostile toward that which pertains to others. As you observe the self, your mind also becomes inflated. You develop a belief that there is this very self is either eternal or subject to annihilation. Similarly, you develop the wrong view that denies the existence of things such as the teacher who taught selflessness, and what he taught. I think it says that you deny the existence of, I think it's the same, karma and its effects, the four truths, and the three jewels and so forth, or you become doubtful as to whether such things exist or are real. And then Dharmakirti is also quoted in the medium stages, Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, where it says, once there is a self, there is an idea of another. On the behalf of self and other, there is attachment, hostility. All of the faults come about in association with these. Okay. So then when we get to over to number 4, then the Nyomo Biju Chipa Yimba.
Nyomo Biju don't do Katula
This Sumba.
Somba.
Nyomo Yeme Shipa.
Nyomo Mazon, Nyomo Tazonji.
The Jew, the
Chetachi, Zimbaro, Chetachi, Matuliji. Soba Nyomo Mazon. Chi Chu, the Judd, and the touch job man, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so then when we get to the faults of the, we're looking at number 3, the causes of the afflictions, and the Lamrim Chenmo Rinpoche says is very clear. And then the faults of the afflictions, Jayan Sheba breaks down into 3 categories. First, the category of the faults of the afflictions according to the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, Lord Maitreya's ornament for the Mahayana Sutras. And the second category is the faults of the afflictions according to Shantideva's Bodhichara Avatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. And then the third category is the faults of the afflictions according to the great Kadampa master Gombawa, where he shows he combines Shantideva's points and Maitreya's points to elucidate it, to clarify it, or to present it. So this is the third category.
Niba lesu bichu do the ne do niba lesu bichu le for the niba lesu bichu do the lani chemu de do beije na de ro ne sonju sudin le ne sonju sudin bole ya tinson to dimbal do dimba niba te lesu bichu so the ne taringa so tan no mara.
Okay, so today we're going to go to page 303 in the English, and we're going to get to that second category, how you thereby accumulate karma. So that's where we're going to begin today. Let me just find it. Dele Supitsu. Okay. Dixon.
What the Lesubitsu la ni, Sajil Nindo, Lesubitsu la ni, Sabre Shay Lengoswatan. Tajata subchulos. Larin Sajin Levote, Lesubichu the Sajin Indua. Lesubicula ni, Sabra Shai, Lengoswatan, Tajata subchulos. What the chulos Sajinije, Tambulani, Sambi Ledan, Sambi Lesos, Sambi Lesos Roa. Sambi Lesos, what the button. That's Subitulani, Soa de Udon Subatan, Soa Danu Subas, what the Legud Sajin, what the Dudujimadundo, Lesubitulani, Sabrashe Lengoswatan, Tajata Subitus, Tamu Saji de Avangabajana, Narindona, Nietzsche, Tatambo, 사바세 레옹송한테라 니 샘비레 당 삼비레 니제
Less so.
대저다 수비 취들라 네 레 수비 취들라 초와도와 돈도 레수바당 초와당유 셔도 네 수바고 초와당유 주도 레사바 니요레스 어떠바들도 어때 사진을 해봐지는 아주 나신도나
Less so. So, in the Sora Dewa dan Sora Danyom, the Ewa, the Sempa dan.
제가 수비 출라니 초와디유 돈도 수바당 초와도와기 제도 레수 수바 수비 취지당 초와당유기 제도 레수바 사진이 니 되도와
Okay, less so.
kuchu saji angat tenshana kuchu tata kare.
Oh, okay, Rasa, Tuchena, Gongyo Mepachi. So, we begin with how you thereby accumulate karma being the major heading. Under that, there are two categories. First, identifying the karma that you accumulate, and then a second category of how you accumulate karma. So under identifying the karma that you accumulate, there's two categories. First, karma that is intention, and then karma that is intended action. So there's those two categories. And then under the category of how you accumulate karma, you have two categories. Accumulating karma for, how you accumulate karma is explained in two parts. First, accumulating karma for happy feelings or pleasant feelings, and then second, accumulating karma for neutral feelings.
다 레라 샘비레 더 삼비레스니 야근도와 샘비레스나 이질레
Lesser.
삼비레스나 룡아글레 팀바레
Lesser.
르동아글레
Sedu, Naila.
어떠저 로즈게나는 아솔라리 치번도나
Lesser. So, under the identifying the karma that you accumulate, you find two categories. Karma that is intention, so this is necessarily a mental karma, and then karma that is intended action, so this is a karma of the body or speech.
샘비레 샘비레스나 이레지
Lesser.
삼비레스나 룡아글레
Lobsang.
어떠제 다 제트라 수비 레수비 취들라 취라 사진인도와 소화도 유던도 수바당 소화당용 셰도 수바스 어디 레수바 사진 어디 되도와 원래 레고 사진 어디마도 모두 때마도 모두와 그런 아주 많이 치면 좋다.
So then we get to the how you accumulate karma, and then there are those two parts again: accumulating karma for happy feelings or pleasant feelings, and accumulating karma for neutral feelings. Now we'll go back to the Lamrim.
Yeah, Lari chimen zeronas.
So we'll read that.
Nibate lesu bichulani sabra chayu leungozwata te jeta su bichulos.
Lesso.
Sabra chayu leungozwata jeta su bichuni. Tombola ni sajil jibarwa ni te sembi le dan sambi le zos sembi le dan sambi le zos sembi le dan sambi le ni jagdwa sembi le dan sambi le zos sambi le zo ta tombo sembi le de kanda jagorsna tombo sembi le de ane wote 상가 군주래 상가
Lesso.
네 상가 군주래 어디 송샤스 상가 군주래 셈바당 셈바강시나 네센 뭐버는 도시바 이질레데 gawata magawata lomate toma nala senjuba shibi ne lejeno she sumba tar rata sumba dembe sen yu nala yushin kuwa shibi senju yijile sos de kundu ki wate sanga koso wate sonsas marbe sembi yijile ane tombo ne semba de sambi le ni so tombo ne kundu le semba kanshe na sen ngoban de sheba ila sheba tes ta kante semba so tere ta kante semba sana 안 가서 미기 시바 나이 시바 나이 시바 지 시바 류지 시바 이 시바 요 말바
맞아요.
근데 이지 나바 시바 두요로 나바 시바 두 미기 나바 시바 나이 나바 시바 나이 나바 시바 지 나바 시바 류지 나바 이지 나바 시바 두요 말바 두르지 코드 산중강강 요래 소아 뉘시 셈바 일라 시바 리바 소아 뉘시 셈바 일라 시바 소데 레드 시바들이 도시바
맞아요.
소아 뉘시 셈바 일라 시바 리바 나도가
맞아요.
어디 레드 어디 이지 시바던 소바된비 셈바당 원시던 소바된비 셈바도 레라동도래 소아 뉘시 셈바 일라 시바 어디 군중가고 너네 집한테 원래가도 놀래 어디 다 미기 나마시고 그것도 좀 소아 셈바데 미기 나마시고 그 레이머래 어디 레드 그 가서 그랬다 미기 나마시도 집한테 결하서 나머지
맞아요.
전나올래 안에 집이 차만 보여로다 안에 싫어 집이 차 띵은지 내비 차 안에 소화가 용이 차 안에 어디 셈바데 유아시비 차 셈바데레 미기 나바시 셰바도서 주 메제드 주 통고로 말바 메시 주 통고로 메시 주란 조바시비 네바데 셈발이 요가레스
맞아요.
메시데 주란 조고로 메시 주 통고로
맞아요.
메시 주 통고에서 메시드 주란 조바시비 네바데 셈발이 요가레스
맞아요.
메시 유라 요아시비 실리진 세종데 셈바레스 드나지 나이시비 코드슈는 셈바요로데 나이시바 달은 조고는바
맞아요.
나이시바 달은 조비 실리진 세종데 오데 셈바레스 드나지 이지시바다 가리 이시바 몽요로다 안에 샤주그 센도 소마데비 이지시바데 네 샤주 센도 소마데비 이시바 레스 오만벨레 샤주 센데 샤주는 조바시비 실리데 셈바들 요아레스 돈이 두비 셔도 소마덴비 네 셈바들레 돈이 두블로데 동바냐란 조바시비 네바데 오데 셈발 요아레스 돈이 두블레 네 nganyugle khoa phenjigle what manroa yoashibi shelejan kundilu sunato wateredoa
So, identifying the karma that you accumulate. So, we karma that is intention. So we have intention. So this is necessarily mental and karma, and then intended action is necessarily a body or speech karma. We have a quote from a Sangha's Compendium of Knowledge. It says, "What is intention? It is mental karma that involves the mind. It acts to engage the mind in virtuous, non-virtuous, virtuous, and ethically neutral activities. This intention is mental karma, a mental process that moves and urges the mind with which it is associated towards objects." So we see intention is a omnipresent mental factor. There are 5 omnipresent mental factors: feeling, discrimination, intention, contact, and mental engagement. So there are these 5 omnipresent mental factors, and intention is one among those. So the intention, we look at how does intention work. There are 6 types of consciousness. There's eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, tactile consciousness, and then mental consciousness. So there's always an accompanying mental factor whenever there's this consciousness present. So whenever the mind has this consciousness, there's an accompanying mental factor. So the way that intention works in the case of, for instance, seeing a form, the eye consciousness itself is like glasses that then apprehend a glass that, or so I'm not sure if Rinpoche means mirror or glasses. The Rinpoche, the migi number sheba glass, the glass, the mikshe glass.
example.
The glass.
Migi sheba den glass number
Shigu.
Shego,
Shego, mirror. Okay, the mirror. Okay.
One the Toa and Dusheta, what the Nolu Sheba what the Lijiboja.
Okay, so it's like a mirror then. It takes the reflection itself, but then there's many mental factors that are accompanying it. Discrimination and intention and feeling and so forth. So there's just the raw, it's almost like the raw information is apprehended and reflected like the eye consciousness sees a form. So the eye consciousness itself has the reflection of that form, but then the mental factors discriminate it and feel it and so forth. The feeling is associated with it. So we have these 5 omnipresent mental factors that are there accompanying the consciousness, whatever it is. We have a ear consciousness, for instance. We have an intention. So going back to the eye consciousness, we have an intention to see a form, and then the eye consciousness apprehends it, and then these other mental factors discriminate it and so forth. When we look at a sound, there's an intention to hear something, and then the ear consciousness, like a mirror would reflect an image, apprehends that sound, and then the mental factors accompanying that apprehension. So this is how that omnipresent mental factor intention works. And we say that it is a mental karma. And there are many different types. So we could say that bodhicitta, the mind that aspires to enlightenment, where's this intention there? That's a mental karma. So these would all fall under the category of mental karma, and that's why it says, thus mental intention is mental karma, a mental process that moves and urges the mind with which it is associated towards objects. So hearing a sound, you have an intention to hear a sound, you have an intention to see a form. So this is how intention works, and it's necessarily mental karma.
다 생로도 가서 조도 미게 나와시바 나이 나와시바 나이 나와시 지 나와시 레지나 이지 나와시바 조지라 다 생용라 이나 가지고서는 생용 가지고 가지 루리노리 루리 생용 가지고 가지 와레스 가지고 가지는 근두가 유행가 자녀도 년년이쇼 네 그와 주지 현주지 어떤 가지고 가지 이런 가지고 가지 단다 어떤 가지고 끊는 거 같이더라고 끊는 거
년년이쇼 현주지 사년주
어떤 때도 어떻게
유행아
어떤 단한테 끊는 거 공들에 끊는 거 소환도 시선받다 일하시더래 방금 어때 레데 지바드레도 일하시바드레도 일하시바 semba 이질레 semba
So when there are 6 kinds of consciousness, there's eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tactile consciousness, tasting or tongue consciousness, and then mental consciousness. How many mental factors are there? There are actually 51 mental factors. So there are 5 omnipresent mental factors, there are 5 determining factors, there are 11 virtuous factors, there are 6 root afflictions, there are 20 secondary afflictions, and then there are 4 changeable factors. So these are the 51 divisions of mental factors, and the first category were the 5 omnipresent mental factors, and intention falls categorically under that omnipresent mental factor category.
다른 가서 가서 봐봐 근두가로 근두가 소환두시 semba 일하시버리바 어떤 가들로 근두라 그래 근두서나 생근주 코드 근두가 요아레스 생근주 코드 요바이다 근두가 메게 나바시 코드가 요아레 나이 나바시 코드가 요아레 르지 나바시 위지 나 참만 코드가 요에서 생근주 코드를 생중에서 근두가 생근주 코드를 생중에서 근두가
So the reason these are called omnipresent mental factors is that they are always accompanying the consciousness. If there is an I consciousness, there is an accompaniment of these 5 omnipresent mental factors. If there's a nose consciousness, there are these accompanying 5 omnipresent mental factors. So whether it is a mental consciousness or a physical consciousness, there are necessarily always 5 omnipresent mental factors there, and they're always accompanying the consciousness, and that's why they're called omnipresent, because they're always accompanying.
가르코고 나 레사고 그래서 말이야. 나도 생로데 다바리 산시 코도르다. 찬성 그와산 코그레. 찬성 디바산 코그레. 찬성 로마데. what the kadu yobaina less hasabares.
So we have this mind that has many different ways of thinking. Sometimes it's virtuous, sometimes it's non-virtuous, sometimes it's neutral, and thereby we accumulate karma. So we have this mind that has these different ways of being, and then as a result of it, we then accumulate karma from those minds and those various states of mind. So when we're sleeping, are we accumulating karma? So when there is consciousness at the point of sleeping, so there is accumulation of karma that's taking place. There's action, there's a consciousness, there's action, activity. That's a karma dunya.
Yeah. Karma dunya. What the sembile to kundule semba consciousness. Semba consciousness. And the same open to tang also the kanju tenju the summon the shade do. Also kanju tenju ten tisha, Pehitoliore, and Nasulu Shegmaras and Chagum dote, some of the Larisham lesson
So we have here the Kangjur and Tanjur. We don't really read these, but we find Lama Tsongkhapa has taken the points of the Kangjur and Tanjur and put them into this great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. So we find the contents of these great texts, Kangjur and Tanjur, here in this text.
What did this Tanjur
So this quote here from the Compendium of Knowledge is from the category of authentic Indian commentaries.
Kundule semba consciousness, semba choan du she semba de do. Semba consciousness, sem over do sheba yile de goad begoat loma de na la sen juba shebi legend nosa. And the sen da soba de semba de and goad Goal Juba Shile Genre, Magi San Somatebe, Sambate, Magoal Juba Shile Genre, Lomaten Samatebe, Santucos, Lomaten La Jube, Shile Genre, Senores, there is on Lesseres, She Sombatar, Randan Somba Dembe, Saint Ulas, Randan Somba Dembe, Saint Ula Ua, Ushin, Kuashebe. Yoshin Kuashibi, Sanju Yijile Sos, Random Soma Dembe, Send Soma Dembe, Samba de Gote, Send Yula, Yuashibi, Shiba Shiligendis, things on ladies.
So we have the Compendium of Knowledge quote, "What is intention? It is a mental karma that involves the mind. It acts to engage the mind in virtuous, non-virtuous, and ethically neutral activities." So this intention is mental karma, a process that moves and urges the mind with which it is associated towards objects. So this is an intention. So we look at what does this word mean. It's one of those omnipresent mental factors. We have feeling and discrimination and so forth, and then this is one among those 5, which is called intention, and it's a mental karma, and it then moves, you have these virtuous, non-virtuous, and neutral, and it moves your mind towards then some type of activity or action. So then there's accumulation that takes place of karma. So thus intention is mental karma, a process that moves and urges the mind with which it is associated towards objects.
Ta nipa sampi le tere dwa. Nipa ne sen te gwene na yu lunga ki le tes. Sen te gwene na so yiji shebe gwene na yu lu ji le nga ki le do te sampi le so te ja go res. Lunga ki le tes. Lu ji le nga ji le nipa te sampi le la res. Yiji shebe gwene na yu lu ji le nga ki le to so le sampi le se res.
So the next category is karma that is intended action. So karma that is intention is necessarily a mental karma, but karma that is intended action is necessarily a physical or verbal karma. So it says this is physical and verbal action motivated by intention. So this is what karma that is intended action is. It was intended by, motivated by this intention. So you have this intention that motivates you to then act physically or verbally, or physically or verbally. Decent.
Tawa de sembi le de yiji le de sambi le de le da nga le de su song du sa o de sanga gu song du sanga nzue de nzue ne nzue le ne semba dan de je
Tome inye.
Ini.
Okay.
Sanga. Marmare. Tomero basubando. Le ne samba tante she le de samba tante she samba yiji le de ji le danga giles sambi le do yiji le res. Teji le danga gile yiji shebe ju sheba la tene chebe le jile danga gile so sambi le se res. Teji le danga gile she somba ta rosa.
So then we have a quote from Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge. So it says, this is the physical and verbal action motivated by intention, the Treasury of Knowledge. So this is the Abhidharma Kosha, Vasubandhu's text. Karma is both intention and what intention produces. Intention is mental karma. What it produces are physical and verbal karma. So in dependence upon this mental karma, there is a arisal of a physical and a verbal karma, or physical and verbal action. So this is the intended action. It's the action that comes from the intention.
And now
we have a section where a doubt is addressed.
Ne le danga le de la régime dans régime maïmis le gilet de la régime le gilet dans régime maïmis le gilet ni ores le gilet le ngagle de régime le gilet ngagle dans régime maïmis ngagle ni ores ta régime le se tamara beta pendant ngaso ane londe de lansona ane ngaso domba mabone chayo marbe what chano what Zojianjido, what nobody jiggles, what nobody jiggles, nobody long sona, and a cool long sona, Shigando. Now look Shebat Ming Tomaro.
Oh, okay.
Miss Shebat Ming Tomaro.
Less.
I don't know about the Ganes Corsana, Kulun like ta. Doma child or Giro. What the regime was there? Mejizu. The Jesus at what things are. Regisana. Talatene, down the Talatene, Colon control the river, the Regisus, what the Sagomare.
That's it. So now it says the Vibhashikas divide physical and verbal karma into two types, the perceptible and the imperceptible, and hold that both types always have form. So perceptible, for instance, is when someone is angry, their face gets red. This is a perceptible karma. So you can then, through looking at that sign that their faces become red, know that they have a motivation of anger present. So this is a perceivable or perceptible, what is meant by perceptible. Okay, so we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. We good? Jitsun.
Yeah. Then Matanga de Lunga Lela Regi Dan Regi Mai Bani, Talunga Regi said what the Kulun Ribashibi. Kulun Ribashibi what the later Regi Lela in Bada. Kulun Bubashibi town, that's a woman of a town that is on the town, the engine down that. Kundulana Dumabachavo, Mabachava to Kundra Jebro. Jetanda.
Okay.
Telatene, Joe, and a conduit Redwood, Shetugoro. And Gawaji drew in now, Leonaju, and what they go out there, Putur, down the Regis, what is in the
Gewa, Danda Gare.
That Gawal and also go out to the local God to somebody Euro. Go me to Marota.
That's it.
Shluge, Nandula den of God who doesn't require Yorota.
So we have.
At the Chubambi, I don't want to
Oh, I see. Tuchena. So when we look at the two different, it says types of karma, we have perceptible and imperceptible. So perceptible karma would be, for instance, when the example that was just given, when somebody gets angry, you see that their face becomes very red, so then you can, by use of a sign, know that that person is angry. So this is when we look at the different classifications of correct signs. This falls under the category of correct sign of result. So there's various categories of correct sign. This is correct sign of result. And this allows one to know that that person is angry by the red face. Other examples are when we see someone engaging in virtuous activities, such as making offerings or making prostrations, and this is perceptible. We see them doing virtuous things, so this is a virtue that we can see. So these are two examples of perceptible, either physical or verbal karma. So these are two categories. I mean, two examples.
What is regime I Missouri? Is it regime I Missouri? Regime I Missouri. Suzaku mean to Marota. Maton to Telatene, Town that to Maro, Tongo Marota. Colon Reto Mare, regime I Missouri is. Colon Riba Majibi, regime I Missouri.
So, imperceptible is referring to those things that have form, those karmas that have form but can't be seen. So for instance, the individual liberation vows, the vows of a novice, or vows of a novice monk or nun, or fully ordained monk or nun, or any other of the other individual liberation vows. Excuse me, those vows have a form, but we can't see the form that they're in. So those, when I say they have a form, means that within our consciousness there's a form that actually is there when we take a vow. So that form of the vow can't be seen. So that's an imperceptible form. It falls categorically under imperceptible form, and in this case, an imperceptible physical or verbal karma.
What the Lunga led to Kangalo, Zoo is Shidama Logres, Shidam Trotama, Shidama, Dutaba, Sanzamba, Oma Baje, Mother, Shidama, the Lutan Aglet, Zoo in Sagres, Zoo in Sagres, and Shidama Zoo in Samaze, Oma Tanju Zoo in Sagres, Mon Shemen Zoo de Tanju Jam. Moi, j'aimais zo de Shedama que le rang les zo in series.
Tantric.
Tanju zo il logres. D'autres bases pour semandos. D'autres bases le gilet dans les zo pour semba dans un autre semba c'est nous.
Semba, okay.
What est dans somba de dunya du semba gil jagramandu le gil tangale na semba im chaus zuma im chaus lagdos do basu pon semba deux
and the long carbonate
doa dans
doa, okay,
doa baja don zero
so when we look at this physical and verbal karma and look at how they're categorized, the different tenet systems have differing views of how they're categorized. So we have 4 tenet systems. We have the Vibhashika system that's mentioned here in the text, which is called the Great Exposition School. We have the Sautrantika system that's called the Sutra School. We have the Chittamantra system, which is the mind-only school. And we have the Madhyamaka system, which is the middle way school. When we look at the view according to the Great Exposition School, the Vibhashika school, they state that physical and verbal karmas are necessarily form. But when we look at the Sautrantika school's view, the Sutra school, they state that if it is physical or verbal karma, it is necessarily intention. So there is a pervasion there. It is necessarily that. So we have the differing views. But the middle way consequence school holds the same view as the Great Exposition school. So the Madhyamaka Prasangika school holds the same view as the Vibhashika system, in that they state that physical and verbal karmas are necessarily form. So the Sautrantika school, Sutra school, states that they are not form because they are intention. So we have a differing view there.
Le nga le la reje mai mani so she ne zo je kona shida ma de ba shida ma la gdos to ma ji na ne shida ma la go shida ma de ba las shida ma de ba la na le ben yi de mo du ka ga do se da le ben yi ba su ba du ka ga do se yi je ka nes Tubeni Sazamba, Tomodo Baje, and the Kongo Pinya to the Sangaro Sanga. And the Sanga go the Sanga do the Guardian patient shooting out to the mount, then the shoe, and the saddling out the Donania to the tree. Any the Saga Jeda, any Shirak River Sabumendo, River Sabaje, Sanga to River Tonrimbuji. Shibumanwa.
Ribayar.
Riba Sabuji. Sabo. Tingrimbo.
Oh, okay.
What Kusanga what the song is like Sidunk Sabo, Tingrimbo. Kasugre. Lelabashim to Kajimandwa. I know what the Basubandu Chua Tanguras, Churung would what the Manda and what the Carres. Cheguaras da. And the Sanga Gusunguaras, and the Laji Rubicheguaras, Rubichin at the loud waters. Madrid was Sangaluzuna, and the dead to cheat the wager with the could judge things I should be wager with the Basuba Shima to Bajimandua. The trade with the Laji Rubicheguaras. 안에 어디 바수 반도가 되는 상을 주고서는 제주 자망을 셰지로 수루지다스 라우레스다 나 셰드 마지면로 네 제주 자망을 송버스다 바수 반도가 담보 어디 티진을 가바대 잡으로 아 도도바체네 티바치미 슈드 지금은도서 가바대 잡으로 대전을 준주나 준주보다 디바대에서 어떻게 체지마도 보이나 주로 대전이 대주 뭐 제스 대전이 대주 먼저도 대전이 대주이죠 어제 대주 뭐서 샤동지야 임버다 어떤 시간도
when we so this it says the Babashikas divide physical and verbal karma into two types, the perceptible and imperceptible, and hold that both types always have form. Basu Bandhu refutes this, asserting that physical and verbal karmas are intention that work along with perceptible physical and verbal behavior. Thus, both forms of karma, intention and intended, are actually intentions. So, Basu Bandhu was the brother of Master Asanga. And Basu Bandhu became a mind-only school follower, a Chittamantran, but originally was a follower of the Sutra school, which wouldn't be considered a great vehicle tenet, and within that disparaged some of the great vehicle tenets within his writings. And Basu Bandhu was a very very intelligent and very voracious in his studies. Very put in a lot of perseverance, a lot of effort, and was able to understand things very readily. Whereas his brother Asanga had more distance from when it came distance from that knowledge. Meaning that Basu Bandhu was closer to the knowledge, and Asanga had a more difficult time. That knowledge was further in the distance. But Asanga was actually helped by Lord Maitreya and brought to Ganden, if we look at the story, by Lord Maitreya, and then helped and given this information, and then given these texts, the 5 treatises, on the level, the 5 treatises of Maitreya. So Asanga brought those texts back and was able to understand the higher view because of this. So this was according to the mind-only view. So Basu Bandhu went to his half-brother Asanga and said, "Why is this that you're able to understand this information?" And he said, "Well, I've been helped by Lord Maitreya." And he said, "Well, why won't Lord Maitreya help me then?" And he said, Maitreya stated that there was some kind of obstruction that Basu Bandhu had created by writing these things against the Mahayana that kept him from being able to understand some of the higher views. So he said that it was necessary for him to write a lot of information about the Mahayana in order to almost acknowledge his downfalls, and almost like a confession of his downfalls. This is what is meant by that. So at this time where Basu Bandhu states this, he's a holder of the Sautrantika school view, which says that these physical and verbal actions are and those intentions are all intention, and they are necessarily not form. The views of the higher schools negate that point. So that's the story of Basu Bandhu and Master Asanga, and kind of the way Basu Bandhu went from being a Sautrantika to a mind-only practitioner, and why we see this Sautrantika view in this text when we normally associate him with the mind-only school and the Mahayana views.
다 콘도디 너도바 인딜로 토멜 존조치고는 제마 토멜 나주 주니로 도자 티지 많이 란체지 계절로 좋다 존스
데가레
그러면 이니 어때 쿠빈자 이니 네 토멜 나질 루바전 롬모 데버레스 엔딩은 그 토요 말레스 and the Pusha Mobile no Pusha Mobile Trivers, Junji, Minjal Junji, Tome Lomo, National Rubajavare, Tingan and Toyo Mares, and Magu Pusha Mobile Trivers, Junji Gabaja.
Lopu, the
Chema Tome, as Jin Losamu, Basuba, Tome Gabaja. Cheme Tome Nas Shinilo, Lugini, Na Shenagil, Ruajabares, Tingas in Kutoya Mares, what the Pachamo Jitvares, Junji, the Gabaja water, and the Jema Talme Tome Taji Jena Garjena, teaching Pachatan Mobo, ne Pogokis on the Jujun, and the Inius at the Valley. In use the Pelagian juice. And in Kuriba Roda, one teaching a truth to Tebajana, Sugar Sanzama Showers would do a Sanzama Chandras.
So Master Vasubandhu heard of, had a great amount of wisdom, and then was able to later, because of later understand these tenets and become a Chittamantran view holder, even though he was originally a Sautrantika view holder. Master Asanga had meditated in a cave for over 12 years in order to have a single pointed concentration of Lord Maitreya, but was unable to do so. But during that time, he wrote a large amount of information about the Mahayana, and this is why it said he was able to make it to the understanding of those teachings before his brother did, even though his brother was very wise. But then when he came back and presented this information, because his brother was very wise and had then gone through this process, Vasubandhu was able to convert to this higher view.
So
then Vasubandhu, who had disparaged Asanga initially for bringing this viewpoint forward, apologized to Asanga and said that it was a good view. So he had disparaged him prior to that.
Chabagaze Baba in a Shati Burgi is a Chundra Marota, who put to zero, or to Zamajano, sorry, Shabba.
Yonder Surna?
High Jabba Chabojans, High Jabba, Nangatu Chabba, Chabba the High Power is a Grovata, Chabarin.
Okay, rain. The God.
The Rimbo Shagi could put Nolun Raya Marota. High Jabba Chabojan, Shai to Chumuros. What the Vasubandhu Sangal Sorish.
So Vasubandhu said, "I'm sorry" to Asanga, and he said something like, "When the gods rain down water, even that water doesn't go through the thick head of a bird," or something like that. Doesn't go through the head of a bird. And he said, "I'm sorry for not understanding this," or something like that. I think it's a translator's note. I think it's like being hard-headed. But if I mistranslated it, I apologize. But it's what I think it is trying to say. Dixon.
Kane Lunga Grijdan Nyadu Jubi Sembala Jebis. Lunga Grijdan Nyadu Jubi and the Luji Shebata Shebata Somba Debi Semba. So on the Semba. Lane and Semba in Chelsea Lagos.
Rinpoche, the Sampa, the lay Semba in Micha.
Semba in Chelsea.
Then Dodepa Dang Sampa Chipa.
Mon Shemezo the Tanju Jang. Dodo Basu Point Samadus. Dodo Baje, Sansan Baje, Omar Ajuba Point Samadus.
Okay. So here it says the Vibhashikas divide physical and verbal karma into two types, the perceptible and the imperceptible, and hold that both types always have form. Vasubandhu refutes this, or Vasubandhu negates this point. He asserts, so here Vasubandhu is a Chittamantran, but the ends up a Chittamantran. But the viewpoint of the Sautrantika school, which he was initially, and of the Chittamantran school, and of the Madhyamaka Yogacara, the middle way autonomy school, the lower Madhyamaka school, they all hold that if it's karma, physical, verbal, if it's karma, it is necessarily intention. So if it is the intention or it is the intended, it is necessarily intention. So those three tenets hold that same view, whereas the Vibhashika school and the Madhyamika Prasangika school hold that they are necessarily form. So these are the differing views. Dixon. Vasubandhu refutes this by way of the Sautrantika view, or the Sutra school view, that states that if it's physical or verbal karma, that they are intentions that work along with perceptible physical and verbal behavior. Thus, both forms of karma, intention and intended, are actually intentions. So they're necessarily an intention if it's a karma. Ditsun.
Chitan lela gi le yuare, magi le yuare, loma teng le sun yuares. She lela gi le yu, magi le loma teng le sun yu jans. Dene tambani sos. The cause le cause she had to gi le the magi le ni shigres, loma teng le su sun mares. Pachatusun zu the gile the magu lane catchway in Jitan, gile the magi lane son de Hirawata, son yu jang, then the Tombani so, Lake of Sua zu the gile the magi lane dress, ni so, gile la yang, Saji Samani les, gile la Sabat Chibiletan, Sameg ni waters, Sameg leni. Sameng lesson, but Tonlan Yajashiro, Tony Monson to be Tonlan Golan, Malula, what to go to Samere on the Same. Tony Monson to be. And Tonlan Tan, Golan Tan, Malula, so Same, but Same.
Yeah.
No.
That's it.
And Jetan Taba in a Same, which chose Taba. Taba in a Same, which chose. Dujila Sajid Samini waters, Dujil non Samede, what did that doing also to be Tonangon to Sinjirota, Samet to Sinjire, Saji, what the Maimi, Sheba Mojo, Saji in Jirota.
So it says, in general, karma is of three types: virtuous, non-virtuous, and ethically neutral. But here are we concerned only with the first two, so we're only going to deal with virtuous and non-virtuous karma. Virtuous karma is of two types: contaminated and uncontaminated. So when we look at what uncontaminated karma is, it would be the direct realization of emptiness on the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. So this would be an uncontaminated karma.
So those
pathways which are direct perceptions of emptiness at the path of seeing, meditation, and no more learning are uncontaminated karmas. But So when we look at the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we see that mantra, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. Within that, implicitly, we find 5 pathways. We find the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So the Paragati, Parasamgati, and Bodhisoha are the 3 pathways which are uncontaminated. So these are the direct perceptions of pathways which are direct perceptions of the emptiness. These are uncontaminated.
사제 기레다 수주주라 여바 기 사제 기레니 요레 니레 근데 셔마고사 수수주주라 여베 네 고사제도 수송데레스 파비주지 고사제도 송고마데스.
Then it says, I will only discuss, so I think Rinpoche reread it. In general, karma is of 3 types, virtuous, non-virtuous, and ethically neutral. But here we are concerned only with the first 2. Virtuous karma is of 2 types, contaminated and uncontaminated. I will only discuss contaminated virtuous karma, of which there are 2 types, that present in a noble being's mind, or an Arya being's mind, and that present in an ordinary person's mind. Only the latter need concern us here, so we're only going to speak about the ordinary being's mind. Contaminated virtuous karma in an ordinary being's mind.
Tashi shilela gamagloma de son yojans. Anna gawa da magawa what is okay cheni to ganga ngegundo da gawa. Gawas gi cheni kare. Gawala ina kazi. Magi cheni kare. Magawala ina kazi waras. What and dusuka shegundo. Londo temba kan rande name Dewaji reason about the Gawag Marba. Londo temba kan rande name dongenji reason Magi Seni. Gawala ina ka loji gawada. So
it says when we look at virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma and ethically neutral karma, when we look at virtue and non-virtue, we have to be able to define what those are. We have to be able to know what the divisions of them are. So when we look at the definition of virtuous karma, it is that which has been presented in Scripture and is of the type that brings about happiness. So that's the definition of virtue. Non-virtue is defined by, it is presented in Scripture and is of the type that brings about suffering. So this is how it's defined. And then if we were to say how many divisions of virtue are there, we would say the Gewa Laena Ni. Okay, so we could say the Yichi Gewa. So there's many different, so if we were to say how many divisions, there's many different divisions of virtue. It could be virtue of the body, virtue of the speech, virtue of the mind. So there's many different divisions, but those are the definitions of virtue and non-virtue. So you can find the definitions and divisions of virtue and non-virtue in the collected topics section. Sometimes we call it the logic primer, and in the mind and awareness texts, the Lorig texts, Nudra and Lorig.
What the Shilela Gamaga Lomates and Tagawata Magawa Karuma Shutla Lomate Marba Gamaga Karum Maru Lomaten Seni.
So that which has not been presented in Scripture is defined by it is not that which is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Then that's how we define not presented in Scripture. It's neither one of those two. It's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. It doesn't give rise to those types, and doesn't give rise to what those types do. So I think that's the full definition. Does not give rise to what those types do.
What that go la logic what in the mumbo yoro tanga to pachatu sundu te san tan da to go ya shu marbe ya shu de.
So it's defined as phenomenon not established among virtue or non-virtue. So that's the definition of not presented in Scripture. So we have all of these different definitions, and it's good for us to know what all of this means. Dixon.
Ta gama ga lo ma ten song ye be na na what go na ma go ni de song re ni so. Yi le la sa ji sa me ni le ko sa ji ge le de ma to sa me ge le zu song ma re sa ji dan sa ji de la ya pa bi ju la ye be ni de ba ba ran je ba ba shan san pa bi ju le san je ba ba pa bi ju le ye be sa ji ge le zu song ma re su su ju ji sa ji song re ye ba dans su ju ji le ye ba ni le de shema wo sa 파비줄로 여기 사제 당 수주주 사제니가 나네 수주주 사제 조시거레스 the shamaos. Yeah.
So we have the two types, contaminated and uncontaminated. So the only thing that's going to be discussed is contaminated virtuous action, of which there are two types, that present in a noble being's mind. So noble being is referring to an Arya, a superior being. And so there are here superiors, or here nobles, solitary realizer nobles, bodhisattva nobles, and then there are Buddha nobles. So contaminated virtuous karma within the minds of any among those types of nobles will not be discussed here. Only that present in an ordinary person's mind, ordinary beings. And it says only the latter need concern us here. So ordinary beings, contaminated karma. Dixon.
Ta magi lesa na ngaso what the lojile nabas ngake nabas ije nabas mago jutu marbe what is magi jutu le tu injirwa.
So when we look at non-virtuous karma, we can say non-virtuous karma is those karmas like the 10 non-virtues, 3 non-virtues of the body, 4 non-virtues of the speech, and 3 non-virtues of the mind.
Na goa to what the goa jutu injirwa.
And then we also, when we look at virtue, have the 10 virtues.
What is all? Sajeta Sam Pabijula Yoba to Suju Yoba Nile and the Shema was Tella Gi Lela Sona Maimil Tella Magilen Ro Magilen Sona Maim Leres Diba Magoju Diba Magoju Mojubilet Sona Maim Leres Sona Maimile and Pachibing Nason Page led in Zero. So no Miami lay in Las Magi lay na so no Miami lay in Chap. So no Miami lay in a Magi lay Majo. Twenty jars and demon are Magi lay in Las So no Gelene de Kanji de Kanji Dubi les os so no lay de Kanji Dubi Debi se Dubi. Ne gile sono jele segre sono jele ta me penje le ta sa dola penje le tu bare sono le segre sono jele ne debi kanji dubi gile sos debi gile debi kanji dubi gile tres sono jele res me penje le ta Dola Penjigale, what Sono Gilipin, what mother.
Lesser.
That can't come on in Penjigale, the Mule Logomare. Mule, Zudan, Zumeji said to be Goas Sabatachi Les was. That Zudan Zumek said to be Sajigale. That's something Nedu Dongoje. Zumek Nedu Dongoje. What the Sunday Ngoja Guayo, Gona, Nedu Ngojas Kanin Toyota. Nedu Sena Dangazu Pachimana Surnamore. Ngoju Juru, Ngoju. And what the Ngojas again on the Biseduji, Nyamuraba, pond de ngoji thong to ngoji toye ge ne gawa gonja da gawa tu ne do lo ne do quand comment il paye les ne do ma do ngoji je ma ngoji
Zume. Hakomar. There's Rimbo Go. Gutsumason. So there are, when we look at, I just don't want to forget this part. So we have virtuous karma, we have non-virtuous karma. So virtuous karma is necessarily meritorious karma. Non-virtuous karma is necessarily non-meritorious karma. So we can say that non-meritorious karma necessarily is the propelling karma that gives rise to the lower realms of cyclic existence. Meritorious karma, we can say, is the propelling karma that gives rise to the higher realms of cyclic existence. So these are the two types. But then we have another type of karma that is called invariable karma or immutable karma. And this is karma that's created by those beings that are abiding in the form and formless realm. So it goes on to read in the treatise, 1 second. Yeah. 236, 76. All right, I'm not going to find this, but it goes on to read, non-virtuous karma is karma that is non-meritorious. Meritorious karma is virtuous karma in the minds of beings of the desire realm. Invariable karma is contaminated virtuous karma in the minds of beings of the form or formless realms. So this is sometimes called immutable karma. And Rinpoche was giving the different levels of formless realm. And there's clairvoyance that takes place at the uninterrupted state where of the path of seeing, where the root afflictions are abandoned, and then there is one that's achieved through concentration. So I was trying to look those up, but it's just going to be too hard to do it in the midst of everything. But there are these different types of this formlessness and so forth, and this and form realm. Rinpoche just mentioned the formless realms, and these beings create invariable karma when they are engaging in contaminated virtuous actions. Decent. So there, so the question arises, why is this called invariable karma? So when we look at virtue and non-virtue that is achieved in the desire realm, it says that karma that should bear fruit while you are a deity may instead bear fruit while you are a human, an animal, or a hungry ghost. Whereas the not variable, I'll just read all this. The effect is at a certain level does not mature at levels other than that. That is invariable. So here it only matures in those specific, in the higher deities' realms, whereas the variable karma can mature in any of the realms. So this is why it's called, one is variable and one is invariable, because the variable karma can mature in any of the realms. The invariable karma requires the higher realms in order for it to arise or mature. To arise. Dixon.
Ta kong kaba yasana zyo ren do da dan zyo les so nan de kan gi les so nan le de bi gi le de jagures me koma le jebes me le do kan koma zu me de jebe le de me le sres she son sos je sais que ji shir me le she ja she na je daran de ba je dan Deba kana lai ten la menju le kaji matan dondu tan eda ji ten la menba ne debu yo imba te jin do kan koma sa jin do menju le sa tele jin do menbe meyu le she sha de le kanshi san dada lena meshi meyushir shesong bishiros shesong daros.
So it says invariable karma is contaminated virtuous karma in the minds of beings of the former formless realm. So then we have a quote from the Treasury of Knowledge. It says, merit is the virtuous karma of the desire realm. Invariable karma produces the higher deities' realms. Why is it invariable karma? In the desire realm, karma that should bear fruit while you are a deity may instead bear fruit while you are human, an animal, or a hungry ghost. Thus its effect is variable. In the higher deities' realms, karma that should bear fruit at a certain level does not mature at levels other than that. Thus it is invariable. Then we have another quote from the Treasury of Knowledge that says, why? Because of the fruition of karma on these levels. Why? Because the fruition of karma on these levels is not variable. Indeed so.
Debi kana lai ten la menju le kaji debi lai le kaji ne mei ten la meba yuares matan donru ten la meba yuares eda ten la meba yuedan debi yuares yuayimba tejin do kan komar sa jen do menju le sa de jen do memebe meyo ashates kan koma jibile de kan koma rugur ma do jendal yog mares magza meyo ares kon garan zueres kan san da to le na mesh meyo she son bataros.
So again, we have the quote from the Treasury of Knowledge. This says, merit is the virtuous karma of the desire realm. Invariable karma produces the higher deities' realms. So why is it invariable karma? In the desire realm, karma that should bear fruit while you are a deity may instead bear fruit while you are a human, an animal, or a hungry ghost. That's its effect is variable. So in the higher deities' realms, karma that should bear fruit at a certain level does not mature at levels other than that. Thus it is invariable. Thus the Treasury of Knowledge. Why? Because the fruition of karma on these levels is not variable. So that ends that section on karma that is intended action. So I think we'll end there, and we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. So please, everyone, think about this, and I will present this again in the future. So we have concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of all teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Suji Rimchi Gutsi Shapi